We can fail 10 times, but if we fail the same way 10 times, we failed ourselves.
Hello, welcome. My name is Heath Gascoigne, and I am the host of the Business Transformation Podcast. And this is the show for business transformators who are part business strategists, part business designers, part collaborators, and part negotiators. Business transformators have moved past just design and include oversight of implementation of those business designs and business transformation, and include stakeholder management, coordination, and negotiation. If you work in strategy development and implementation and work to ensure that the strategy is aligned to the business design and technology, then you're probably a business transformator. This is a show where we speak to industry experts and professionals to share their stories, strategies, and insights to help you start, grow, and run your business transformations. Welcome to the Business Transformation Podcast. And in this episode, we are talking to one of those industry experts all the way from the USA. We are talking to the one other than new author, and although I'm going to drop a few insights here and sneaky releases before they are generally made public, we've got Mr. James. We're going to go with James or Jim?
Let's go with Jim today.
Jim Landgraf. Okay, thank you, Jim. Jim is, and I've just learned this, I knew of the term, but I didn't understand the context, is a business cartographer, as opposed to a geographic cartographer, but the cartographer being that maps the geography, the landscape. With Jim is a specialist in mapping the business, very similar to a business architect, actually. He comes from over a decade experience in working in the business as opposed to on the business as leading and key decision maker, and now is in the position of supporting and helping customers and clients with their transformations on the business. Jim, welcome to the Business Podcast. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Okay. There's a recent announcement that you're going to share with us as we go through this for the audience. Jim, like myself, has a method and he's published his book, and we're going to get into that. But as we talk about, we've got the 3 points we'll cover. From your perspective as a cartographer, as one of the bows in your toolkit, what do you see the industry is doing right? Do you have a particular approach? Maybe this might be an opportunity to plug the book that you follow when you go in to help clients. And the third one is, if you could do it all again, or you could do it differently, or do it differently if it made sense to, what would you do differently? And this is really the takeaway for the audience, so they go, okay, yeah, these are the top 3 things that I would do. Okay, so kick us off. So what is the industry, in your perspective, doing right or doing wrong? We've had a lot of conversation on LinkedIn, actually, and that you've commented to a lot of my posts, and I'll comment to yours. And so kick us off.
I think that it's interesting. It's an interesting question because so often, especially on like social media, you hear about all the stuff that's going wrong, right? You hear about the big wins and then all the stuff underneath that's falling apart. And I think that the reality is that businesses, and I've been in Fortune 200 and also $50 million a year businesses, so everything in between, and they all have a common goal, is that there's people there that really want to do the right thing. There's people there that really feel passionate about what they do. They really feel passionate about wanting to move the needle, for lack of a better word. So I think what businesses do well is they really try to harness that, right? They really get into that whole thing and get people excited about wanting to be better, right? Wanting to improve, wanting to get out there. And so I think that they do that. I think more and more businesses are starting to invest in more of that transformation and beyond just the big dollar consultants coming in there and implementing stuff, or the SIs or whatnot. I think they're starting to really realize that we have to invest in things like change management. We have to invest in things like business architecture. I still think there's a little bit of unclarity about what those actually mean to the business, but I think that they become more than just buzzwords. So I think that's a good thing. I think that we're seeing kind of a trend towards grasping those concepts and putting those in place.
Okay.
I think that businesses are understanding what success looks like. And again, it's funny, I think if most businesses, you did a SWOT analysis, strengths and weaknesses are oftentimes the same thing, right? We're a big company that does this thing, that's our strength. Our weaknesses, we're a big company that does this thing, right? And we can't get out of our own ways, or we can't be as nimble or as agile as we want to be. It's just always been interesting to me when you do those kind of things, that those strengths are oftentimes, and weaknesses are oftentimes similar.
Yes, the pole opposite. And what's that law? The equal and opposite.
Yeah.
Physics.
The yin and yang.
So
right?
Yeah. I would want to play back a couple of points you said there quite quick. Is that what the industry is good at? They said change management, business architecture, and the understanding what good looks like, which is, I think, very key. So just on that business architecture one, I like what I see and hear myself is that clients know of this term business architecture, but they don't know what it means.
Right.
And they hear the name, and then they'll go call a business architect, and next thing you know, the business architect isn't doing architecture; they're doing deep business analysis, or they're doing some vendor evaluation. And
Solution architect.
Yeah. So I think it's good now they're consciously aware of the discipline or techniques that are out there. Now it's the application. And also the change management. It's really good to see that a few years ago now, there wasn't, as a core project team, there wouldn't be a change manager as part of that core team. But now they're almost mandatory on change. So fantastic.
Right.
These transformation projects are mostly technology either driven or enabled, but people. And you change managers to help manage that.
Yeah. And I think what businesses are seeing that they're investing millions of dollars in a CRM, for example, right? I'm going to go and buy Salesforce and put it in, and I'm going to spend, as a medium-sized business, $8 to $12 million on that. And then they get to the other side of it and no one's using it. They're like, wait a second, we spent all this money and we're still doing the things that we did before, right? We're still doing the things the same way. And it comes down to that change management. And change management isn't just about the training. And I think that's what the thing that gets lost, right? People think about change management similar to business architecture, and it gets lumped into the piece of it that they understand. Is it about capabilities? Is it about training? It's a lot more, right? Those are just building blocks to the whole thing. And ironically, like we talk about business architecture and change management, and too often they're too separated, right? Because they're the two sides of the same coin when it comes to transformation. I don't know what I'm changing if I don't have my business architecture. I don't know how to change it if I don't have my change management. So being able to connect those dots is really important as the next evolution of this work happens, right? Is really being able to go there and say, hey, how do I protect my investment? The first thing is up front, you do it with good architecture and make sure that you're not building the wrong things. And on the back end, you make sure that when you're done with it, people are actually using it.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to quote you on a couple of things you just said there. It's about the change management and business architecture are the opposites of the same coin. And I fully agree with you there. And the other point you just said, I like it, is that people's perception and understanding is, I'm going to quote you on this one, that you said, that's lumped into the things they understand. And it's like the technology guys see business architecture, straight away it's solution architecture. And business analysts see business architecture, it's next thing, it's business analysis. Yeah. It's a nice one.
And we've done that to ourselves, right, as a business architect, because we've come in there like it's a methodology and not a practice, right? It's not supposed to be a methodology, it's supposed to be a practice, right? So you can't hit people over the head with theory and with frameworks and stuff like that all the time, because they're going to be resistant. Or we've raised business architects from business analysts or from solution architects, and we've said, hey, we're going to call it this thing, and we're going to market it as business architecture, but really just going to be business analysis on steroids, or solution architecture, because we're assigning business architects to a specific tool, which is the antithesis of business architecture, right? Is that we shouldn't be tool connected, we should be tool agnostic, we should be process agnostic, it's an enterprise function, not a tool function, and not a departmental function.
What I think you're getting into is product management. And so the business architects, the product managers.
Yeah. And again, I'm gonna go a little wax philosophical here for a second, if that's all right.
So the context, sorry, just before we do context, ladies and gentlemen, that Jim is actually a major in English. So the context, Jim's understanding of the application of the English language is at the next level. So when you say philosophical, we're getting a masterclass here. Go ahead. Sorry, go.
No, I guess maybe this skips a little bit towards what I've learned over the years, is that for business architecture specifically, like we've created this image of a bridge between strategy and execution, right?
Yes.
And a bridge connotates there's something that it's spanning, there's something that's going over. And the reality is there's like this abyss between the two, right? In most organizations, in their thought process, there's this abyss between the two. And now they're standing on one side or the other of this abyss. The strategic people are on one side, the execution people on the other side, and business architecture is supposed to be the bridge that gets them. And I think that it's the wrong image, because if you think about it, the reality is most organizations, the bridge they're going to build might be like a rickety suspension bridge, right?
Yeah.
And you're sitting there and you're looking across this abyss that sometimes you can't see the bottom of, right? And you're expecting someone to walk across your bridge. And it's, wait a second, are you expecting the executioners to go to the strategy side, or the strategy people to go to the execution side? Or do you want them to stand in the middle of this rickety bridge over this giant abyss and have a conversation? And I'm like, who's going to do that? They're not going to invest big enough to build a suspension bridge. I'm not building the Golden Gate Bridge across this abyss. And maybe no, do I need to, right? So we need to change that dialogue and change that perception of it, and not take people on this rickety suspension bridge across this abyss, or looking down in the water and there's 1,000 crocodiles waiting to eat you, like you fall in, right? So that's the unfortunate reality of the gap, and the image that we've created as architects and business architects is being the bridge. And I think that we need to change that a little bit and think of it more as a different destination. And the best analogy I can use is we're going to create a vacation house, right? We're going to create a getaway for the business that nobody owns. It's not a strategic owned getaway. It's not a finance owned getaway. It's a business owned getaway that we help create. So they can go there, because when you're at your house and I come to your house, I'm going to have a conversation with you, and I'm going to be conscientious that I'm sitting in your house. So I'm not going to be really contentious, because I don't want to be rude. And as a host, you also don't want to be rude. So you can find this temporary ground of diplomacy. And is that really helpful? I don't think so. So if we go to this guest house together, if you and I go and we can go meet in a villa on the Mediterranean over a bottle of beer or a glass of whiskey or whatever, we can start all of a sudden be opened up, because no one owns that place. No one owns that kind of stuff. Anyway, I can keep going with that analogy, but
I like it.
Right?
I like it. But so the dynamic would have changed from that, and that vacant temporary house, and that may even become permanent at some point, or you build on it. But I like how you're saying that the analogy of we are the bridge between the two, strategy and execution, then neither one of them is going to the other side. And so there's always going to be the abyss, where whatever that looks like in between. No one wants to say, oh, what the hell, deep set? Oh, these risky. And they go, no, we'll stay here. We'll stay here too. And so they never come together. So I think what you're saying is provide a safe space to where they, and those words you just said, open. Nice one. Okay, so we should change the language.
Constructive contention, right? That's the thing that businesses need the most, is constructive contention. To be able to voice their opinions and voice their concerns without fear of reprisal, or without hurting someone's feelings. There's no ownerships in that middle, right? If you and I go to this house, the house of business architecture, I'm going to throw that. Anyway, we go in there.
So where have I heard that before?
It just came to me. Anyway, so we go in there, and it's really a place. But on the flip side of it, and this is where that investment comes in, you have to build a house. Right, you have to invest in that property, and not the rickety bridge. And the other beautiful thing is nobody lives there, right? No one's expected to live there. And I think that's the other problem with business architecture, is people have a tough time understanding where it lives, right? And where they live with it, and how they live side with it. And the reality is that, again, using that same analogy, the business architecture, and I would say other architecture too, data architecture, change management architecture, so on and so forth, they're the ones that are keeping the house up. Right. So when you go there, you don't have to worry about mowing the lawn. You don't have to worry about fixing the toilets. You don't have to worry about stocking the fridge. Right. That's all done before you get there. And that's the purpose of architecture. Right. And the other nice thing is the salespeople go there to have a conversation, and they look at the house and they think about all this stuff that we built. And they're like, oh, it'd be cool if we had a barbecue here. Hey, can you guys give us a barbecue pit? And that's the intake process that goes into the continuous improvement of the connection between architecture and the business, is that they go there, but they can't do that from their house, right? Because at their house, they have everything the way they want it, right? They don't want you to come in there and redo their backyard or redo their barbecue, whatever. Like, I have my stuff. So when you go to the guest house, people can be open-minded. And again, that's the concept that I have. And
I like it. I think I'm going to leverage off that, and I'm going to find some way to put this lovely house of architecture in this sort of vacation camp.
It's just, and it goes into, in a more tactical presentation, right, is that there's this liminal layer that exists, or that needs to exist. And it's a temporary place. And I talk about it a lot in my book is this liminal layer, is that this is where architecture lives, because architecture by nature is abstract, right? It's not intended to
Yes.
be
Yeah.
super specific or super strategic, right? It's supposed to be the abstract of the two, being able to look at your business by one view and then change the lens, right? I can look at a process map and I can change the lens. What does it look like from a compliance perspective? What does it look like from a go-to-market perspective? What does it look like from a people perspective and a training perspective and a professional? And now with AI, what does it look like? Where can I put AI in there? But if you've already created the view, you can change the lens anytime you want without changing the view. And that's the beauty of architecture, right? Is that we provide the view and you bring the lens, right?
Yes, I like it. It's like I like your analogy you said earlier, about the constructive criticism or tension rather. Is the in construction it's like we're building a building, a business, and you have your carpenter, your plumber, your electrician, and they've got their own plans, looking at the same building, the same structural outline, and then so you give for the particular perspectives the different view. The electrician gets the wiring. The carpenter gets the structure, steelman gets where he's going to lay the steel pipes for the carpenter to come in after. So everyone has a particular view, but if you lay them over the top of each other, and this is what I find is that probably not so the confusion, but we're not helping ourselves or our colleagues, as they put all the views all together in the one view, and they go, and it's confusing, and that's when the business go, I don't understand a word they're saying, but they're very convincing. We should just sign off on it because we're going to look silly if it doesn't go ahead. And it goes ahead and it falls over on our face. So let's just approve it. They don't know what they're proving because they can't understand it.
Yeah. And it's a great analogy because if you think about that in the context of how businesses are currently working, the plumbers are creating their own map. The electricians are creating their own plans. And there's nothing tying it to the house. So all of a sudden, I've got open exposed wires next to my tub. And I'm like, that's not safe or a good idea. Or I've got the Winchester house in Sacramento here, which is just built on and without any content or context. It's cool to look at, right? Because you got rooms that go nowhere, you got different shapes and sizes. But at the end of the day, it's not very functional. And I think that's what, and again, we need to take people to that liminal layer, let them visit there, and then they go back home. They don't have to stay there. They don't want to stay there. They want to go back to their own house, but they want to be able to take what they've learned and take those conversations back with them. We can take our memories from our vacation back with us. We don't take the vacation back home.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, if you're missing that, Jim is saying liminal layer, and this is you can trademark that, man. So this is the abstract view, and this is probably let's say, the mirage on the horizon, where they're all chasing or going to. They eventually get there and sit down together in this open, collaborative space where it's free from their current ways of working. They have open opportunity to discuss without fear of failure or criticism for what maybe the future state is. But it's like you said, the other part about plumbers and creating the plumbers, like I've seen it. We're helping a client right now, and they've got these all departments all involved in transformation, and everyone's got their own little map, and it's all different to each other's. And it's like the alignment is not like this. It's like all over the show. Yeah, nice one.
And then they go and they say it's not right. And so they go back and fix theirs independently and then come back and it's still not right. There's nothing connecting them together. And the liminal layer, it's not just academic, right? It's the reality. So if you think about what lives there, right, is that those pieces of architecture, you got a process map, you got capability maps, you've got some of your strategic things, you got business model canvases, you've got SWOT analysis, you've got 5 forces analysis, you've got all these kind of things that you can use as tools. And I'm not suggesting that everyone uses all of them, but there's a progression to it. And as far as, how I take it, it's let's think about it from the strategic level. Let's do a business model canvas, right? Let's figure out how all these things interact with our value proposition. And it's always starting at the what we do. And people like to jump into how well we do things right off the bat. Let's go and fix pain. And I'm like, well, pain isn't relevant if you don't understand where you're going, right? If I don't have a destination, pain is just a bump in the road and it doesn't help you. And when people want to go and fix pain and fix the root cause, right? Fix the thing and set yourself up for success, because businesses are made by human, but they're not human, right? So they feel pain in different ways, and pain is relevant for different people, right? If at the end of the day, there's somebody that's having to push extra buttons every day to do their job and get their stuff across, but the value of changing that isn't worth, I'm sorry, you got to deal with the pain,
Yeah.
right? It's just the
Yeah.
reality of some of the pain's going to stay, right?
How much
If you
you're willing
think
to
about
accept.
it, so when you use those strategic pieces, right? When I go in there and I'll set up with a business model canvas, and sometimes it's just departmental, right? And I'll sit down and say, what is your value proposition for marketing? What are you trying to provide to the business, and what are you trying to provide to your customer? And think about the Uber model, right? When they think about how they do it, they have two different groups that they're trying to attract, right? Riders and drivers, right? And you have to think about how your business can do both. And the same thing inside your business, most businesses, if you're sales, how do I work within the business, and how do I work with my clients or my customers, right? And think about it from that perspective. But those value propositions have to be that centerpiece. The other part of it, and one of the things I like to do is think about it from the forces, right? What are the business forces? What are the market forces? What are the economic forces that are forcing me to have to make changes, forcing me to have to adapt? When smart money came in, right? Credit card companies, all of a sudden, how do I do this? Or buy now, pay later stuff. I mean, think about how that changes the credit card industry. And if you don't think about that, if you don't think about consciously how that impacts your value proposition, how that impacts your partners and your channels and all the other pieces of the puzzle, then you're just going to go and chase your tail. And so if you start with that,
scenario planning.
Yeah, it really is. Which
business planning, some people call it. Yeah.
What's that?
Okay, so I think we're starting to get into the second part, but I just want to cap what you do when you go on, or your process that you follow. So I just want to, so for the audience, I want to recap some real good points you talked about there. Is that you said about there's different tools, techniques, templates, blueprints. You mentioned capability map, process mapping, the business canvas model, but you also said, but a couple of good things there is about how people want to understand what they do and then go and address the problems. And what I think you're getting to was solution mode. And so there's a time and place for everything. But also you said is you're not recommending or suggesting you do all of the things, just some of the things or appropriately. I call that on with my work, our work, I say, I get guys you'll get it now. I'm absolutely sure that with the release of the book, people will call you up and say, Heath or Jim, I'm reading the book and trying to apply it by the letter. And then you say, hey, look, on the front of the book, there's a word and it says framework. And framework means you do two things, apply appropriately and proportionately for the context. It does it to your words, is you don't apply all of them. What I see is when I go into these projects and they have the war room, and aptly named war room, of all the possible blueprints that you could possibly think of have been started or done, and it's consumed a lot of the business's time, and the business is just the change and fatigue. They're like, Jesus, we've got a lot of work, but we've got nowhere. And they'll call that architecture. They're interesting but useless.
Yeah. And it's funny, I'm going to plug my book here just for a second, because when I talk about it, I want the main core of it. What's that?
Yep. Plug.
It's just
go for it.
It's that whole doing things because we can and not doing things because we should. And to your point, the beauty of technology is that it allows us to do things faster. Now with AI, we can do things a lot faster than we used to, right? We can come up with beautiful decks in seconds because we could just use Copilot. We can come up with all these ideas in seconds because we use ChatGPT or something else. But the reality is, everyone talks about efficiency and automating reports. Let's use that as an example, right? Let's go automate all these reports. We've already got 1,000 reports that you're not looking at anyway. So now you're going to have 10,000, and what good does that do? And it's the same concept as architecture. I can have 30 frameworks. I can have 30 pieces of information, but at some point it dilutes the value, right? I always preach this one concept is the best tool and the best framework to use is the one you're using. Just stick with it and use it effectively. It's the changing in the mind. Agile is a great example, right? If Agile is working for you in the way you've decided to adapt it, it works. If it's not working, don't hang on to a sinking ship, right? Either come in and fix it or move on to something that does work for you, right? But that's part of that continuous improvement process is sometimes it's okay to let things die. Sometimes it's okay to start again. Sometimes it's okay. But what's not okay is not picking a direction. What's not okay is saying, let's have 30 things in the room at the same time and try to get them all done, because it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Let's pick 4 of those and just stick with them.
Yeah,
Right?
I
Because
like
even
that.
if 3 of them work, you only have to replace 1.
Yeah, there's a great tips there, ladies and gentlemen. There's a what's okay is okay, and what's not okay, then change it. But also, I love it that I see people getting excited about AI, and they go, "Oh, we can do it." You're like, I'm currently helping a client right now, and they're already talking about, we're in discovery, and they're already talking about design and all about automation and AI. And I said, okay, guys, let's take a step back for a second. You know, the process to process improvement is, first, there's 4 stages. First is elimination, cut out the waste, and then there is standardization, and then improve what you've got, and then the optimization, so you get the better quality, better throughput, to then automation. What you're talking about already at the start of this whole project is the last step. So this is where a lot of clients and companies start, and they work backwards. They automate it, they optimize it, standardize it, and then they eliminate the waste. It's like this: you've just wasted a whole truck. So what you just said about, if you got 100 reports, having 200 reports that you don't use is not going to help you any faster.
No. It's the illusion of efficiency, right? Is that we talk about efficiency like it's this tangible thing that we can gain, right? And the reality is, like, I've worked in business where efficiency does matter, right? I've worked with field technicians and floor technicians, and I'm billing at $100 an hour or whatever. And so I can live in 6-minute chunks, right? I can live at 1/10 of an hour. Every 6 minutes costs them $10, right? I have to earn $10 for that. But beyond that, if you don't have an hour billing kind of thing, the concept of efficiency is this buzzword that people throw out there. But what are you going to do with it, right? If I save you, 8 hours a week of your time because I automate some of your process, what do I do with the 8 hours?
Yeah.
It's Parkinson's law. Work expands to the time allotted to do it.
Yeah.
We're going to find, or now all of a sudden, right, now that you can do more reports, I'm going to expect more reports from you. So I haven't gotten more efficient. You're the same busy. You're just doing more of the same thing. And and sometimes it's a simple thing, right? Sometimes it's a simple, you're in a procurement environment, and man, my AP people are running around and spending hundreds of hours a month chasing POs. I must need some automation. I must need something that does this, some AI bot in there. Maybe what you really need is a policy of when to create a PO, because what the reality is, the problem is that you have 12 different countries that have 12 different sets of rules and criteria about when a PO is needed. And so fix that problem and you don't need any technology. Then you just need some governance and some management, and it's done. And I've seen that this is an actual true example of something that I came across, is that you want to spend $1 million to bring in some procurement tool that automates this stuff, when the reality is all you really need is a policy and to enforce the policy.
Yes.
And so we look to technology, right? We rely so much, we become so reliant on technology. And again, this is something I talk about in my book, is that there has to be that balance, the analog balance versus the digital balance, right? And I think architecture is the vessel to help bring that balance back, right? That liminal layer is where that balance can live the best.
All right, we just done the full circle there, ladies and gentlemen. Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to quote you on a couple of things you just said there. The illusion of efficiencies. I like that. I'll quote you when I post that one up. And also the Parkinson's law about the task, or the time expands to how much you allow time for. It's like, you can clean your bedroom, I'll give you 3 months, or you can clean it in 3 minutes.
Hey, if you have an hour meeting, it's going to take an hour to get the stuff done, whether you need an hour or not, right? If you schedule an hour, it's going to take an hour, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. I try giving half an hour. But so on that, so I think we're getting out of what the industry is good doing. There's lots of things that they're good doing, and then there's opportunities of where they could probably stop doing the stuff, like you said, with Agile. If it's working the way you want it to work, the way it's working for you, keep doing it. If it's not, then hey, that's probably the chance to change it. So now getting out into, so that's part 1. Step 2 is there a particular approach? And I think we're starting to get into that, and you're starting to say, I'll do this and that. So is there a particular approach that you follow? Maybe it's written in the book that every time you go into a client, what is it you look for? Well, you'll see the red flag straight away and go, this is why I got caught in here, because this is the thing that everyone gets caught up on, and these guys are doing it. But what is that process you follow through? Can you step us through it?
Yeah, so I think that it's interesting, because what I like to start with is the value stream, right? What do you want to work on, right? Because we're not going to fix your whole business, right? It's one thing at a time. It's procure to pay, it's lead to cash, it's order to cash, it's quarter report, hire to retire, whatever it happens to be, that value stream that we're talking about. And the first thing I'll ask is, what is your process look like? What is your process end to end? Not how you do it, but what you do, right? And most organizations don't have that, right? And so I've done a lot of this stuff, and what will happen is you walk in there and you walk through, here is, we use procure to pay as an example because it's a relatively simple one, right? I have a request and I end up paying for the bill, right? So AP. Walk me through that process. And first of all, they all need to bring in 6, 7 different people because of the layers of the process, right? There's different things. There's the procurement side, there's the vendor management side, there's the risk management side, there's the AP side, so on and so forth. So nobody really knows everything. And then they'll send me their process maps, and it's really hands-on keyboards, right? I can do this, I can push this button and this happens, or it's system instructions. And so I always bring them up a level, right? Let's go up to just, let's walk through what you do end to end. And what happens inevitably is that everybody comes together and they realize that they don't really understand the process as well as they thought they did. And I've had the same comment in one way or another brought to me almost every time, is that, man, when we look at it this way, it's surprised we get anything done, right? Because the disconnect is really apparent at that point, right? Because we're getting away, we're pulling our heads out of the computers and looking up a little bit. And when we do that, so that's a step
working
one,
on the
really
business as opposed to in the business.
Let's look at the picture of the business. And everyone goes into like how well we do something, right? When I put a box on there that says we do this, we create a PO, right? We create an invoice, we match an invoice to a PO, whatever happens to be that process step. Everyone wants to jump into the pain about that, right? Here's what's the problem with this. I'm like, hold on a second. So really keeping people at that level and walking through that. And then we talk about what should it look like, right? If you could start your business today, how would you do this? Let's take that pain and turn it into opportunity instead, and flip that conversation, because it's a lot healthier to talk about opportunity than it is to talk about pain. First of all. And second of all, it's a lot more practical, right? Because it gives us direction instead of just gives us frustration. And so we do that. And then I like to do a simple kind of interactive maturity model, right? So what's your process maturity look like? And it's process management, right? We think about process maturity in, is this process step mature or not? Is the technology mature or not? I'm like, hold on. How about the management of that? Do people know what the process is? Is it written down somewhere people have access to? Is it incorporated? Can you measure it, whether it's successful or not? It's those little pieces of the puzzle that people overlook. And ironically, in everywhere I've done this, I've had VPs look at it and say, wait a second, if we're supposed to be a 3.1 and we're at 2.1, why are we doing anything else? And there's a lot of aha moments that happen with that, when people realize, the other part of it is that people realize aspiration doesn't have to be a 5. I can be a 4 and be okay with that. That's just my inspiration, is getting that point, right? Everyone thinks from a maturity, like you want to be the top level. That's not reality, right? If I'm a procurement department in a SaaS company, right, it's a supporting function. I don't need to be a 5. But if I'm a procurement company at Costco or Walmart, I have to be a 5, right? Because that's what I do. That's where my margins come from, is my ability to purchase correctly. You have to take things into perspective and understand your business enough to know how to control your aspirations.
I like how you said about the measure part, the step back, but the what and how do you measure success? And what I think the starting point of that is, if your processes work as well as you documented them, and an undocumented process is no standardization for sure. It's more likely done ad hoc and inconsistently. So the inconsistent process, inconsistent output. But then part of that, what you just said about how do you measure it, if you cannot improve what you cannot or do not measure. And so the key point there, ladies and gentlemen, and Jim has called it out early. Okay, and then I like how you're saying about the maturity is, and you've given it a rating or ranking of a 1 to 5, and assessing it and asking the business the question, which is great, because that's the ones that are doing it, and for their own self-assessment, now that they've got the opportunity to look on the business as opposed to being in it. Nice one. Okay, so we're at the process maturity, process management.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think the other piece of it is that it's really important to have the consumer and the producer in the room. And what I do is I will send everybody a survey, right, on a scale of 1 to 5, and I will give them very specific definitions, right? This is what a 1 looks like, this is what a 5 looks like, so on and so forth. So there's not a whole lot of room for interpretation. And so I'll have everyone do it independently. And I'll have not just the people that are doing it. So for example, like lead management, like I'll have the marketing or the SDRs or BDRs, whatever, hey, how do you think you're doing in this? And they'll have the salespeople look at it. Because the reality is then we get them in the room and marketing is like, I'm giving you level 4 leads, and the salespeople like, I'm getting level 2, right? And so that disconnect is happening. But here's the nice thing is that nobody owns maturity, right? So we can have that contentious conversation. That's one of those pieces of the liminal layer. Now I can sit there and say, okay, marketing, you say you're given a 4, sales, you're saying it's a 2. Let's figure out what it really is. And let's use this criteria and be objective about it. And then we can get to an agreement of where are we really at? And so having that conversation when you're doing maturity, you have to look at it from all the perspectives, right? People that aren't in the process need to have a chance to weigh in on what they think it is. And
I like what you said. There's 2 parts, right? You're saying for the audiences, you've got, if I got you right, producers and consumers. So those are ones that are in the process as the operators, if you like. So in terms of SIPOC, you'd say the supplier, and then that C being the customer, the consumer at the end. So you're involving, and I think if we step back a sec about the issues with transformation or business transformation, and one of the problems being lack of business user involvement or stakeholder involvement, and you're calling it out here now, is that you're both your producer and you've got the consumer, so you've got them involved. And you're also saying contention, and there is contention there. And I like it because this is the challenge, right? Where the only way they're going to come together is addressing that contention. And the part that I think is bridging it together is that objectivity, the objective criteria, what good looks like. It's very, like you said that from the beginning, that you've given them the clear definition of what 1 is and what 5 is. So then they go, okay, if I think it's a 2 and you think it's a 4, and it's very clear. There's no ambiguity. So it's definitely going to have to be smack in the middle.
And that's where you come to the agreement. And it's not an exact science. It doesn't need to be, because it doesn't need to be an exact science. The reality is that I know that I'm here and I want to be here, and here's the steps I need to take. So all of a sudden you're building a roadmap too. And to tie it back to the part of the conversation at the beginning, right? If I do that exercise, if I do the process, if I do the process of maturity, if I do some of the stuff from a change management perspective, I have identified my producers and consumers. So I know who needs to be in the room. I know who I need to talk to, and I know at the maturity level of that, what the issues they're coming up against. When I hear the resistance in the organization, it's not giving me pushback, it's giving me feedback, right? And that's what resistance is supposed to do. And if you have those things documented, if you figure this stuff out about where we're at and what we do, then that resistance becomes a signal instead of just noise. And it shows me where I need to work on. It shows me how I need to incorporate people into from the change management perspective. And I'm using that business architecture as that backdrop, right? So now I've put the 2 pieces together, like I said, the different sides of the coin, and now we've tied it all together by using them in the same context and creating one view that both people can leverage for their purpose.
Okay. I like how you're saying here. I'm sorry if I've got my head down. I'm taking notes here because you're dropping a goal. The change, the pushback, and I think that this comes from, I think, experience. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're getting a masterclass here. The newbies into the industry, they will apply it by the book. And I think that what you said is, or the frameworks and methodology, they'll get all those, what you said from the beginning, the process mapping, capability mapping, the SWOT, the 5 whys, all of those things, Canvas, that they want to apply everything. But you're saying appropriately and proportionally, my words and your way, is and the key part, and you said it quick. So ladies and gentlemen might have missed it. And you said it's not an exact science. And so I think what the newbies try and do is they try to fit it into a box and smash it into the box, although it doesn't fit, and apply it 100% of the time. And that's where you lose the business. It's like, well, you apply it to the degree that you need to. Okay. And now talk about change management. And I think this is the part where either the newbies or those that have got certain hats on, they mistaken feedback as pushback. And it's not pushback, it's feedback. It's opportunity for you to take on, and how can we use that to the point you were saying about identifying the issues. Okay, nice one. Beauty.
It really is. Again, and this is the opening of my book, so I'll talk about it. It talks about the storm. We're sitting there in the ocean, and
have you got it there? Because the storm. What's the name of the book there? So ladies and gentlemen can find it.
I'll pull it up here real quick. It's called Slow is Fast: Analog Wisdom in a Digital Storm. So it's available on Amazon.
Fast. Analog Wisdom in a Digital Storm.
Yep.
Okay, nice one.
Just came out yesterday, so I'm still holding the proof copy. So that's why it looks a little funny. But anyway,
people can get it right now on Amazon.
Yes, you can get it right now on Amazon. It's available in a hardback as well as electronic. copy.
Oh, okay. I'm going to put that link to that in the show notes, and also how the people can get a hold of you for anything they need to. Okay, beautiful. So carry on.
So it talks about the noise of the storm, right? It being noise, right? And we listen to a lot of noise in our organizations. We listen to a lot of communication and conversation, but we're often missing the signal. So the analogy is we're on a boat and the sea's rocking and the wind's blowing and the rain's coming down and the sails are creaking and we're listening to all this stuff and we're not paying attention to the lighthouse. The lighthouse in the distance is the signal. That's what's trying to tell us where to go in what direction, but we're so focused on the noise that we don't. And again, it's one of my favorite ones is we want to be customer centric. Like everyone's the voice of the customer, right? The reality is that the voice of the customer is so drowned out by the voice of internal competition. Is that we're competing so hard between marketing and sales and finance and BI and IT and all this stuff to try to do what's right for the customer, but we never stop to listen to them. And again, as an English major, it reminds me of Dostoevsky's Demons, right? Where Barbara's coach was whirling down, hurry to get somewhere and hit this peasant lady. And of course, the whole big scene is she okay? Is Vivera okay? And she barely even notices that this person is lying in the mud, right? And possibly dead. And it just drives off. And it's that whole thing is like, that's the customer today, right? Is that customer is that peasant that's lying in the mud because we're so focused on having our grand carriage and getting to our fancy balls and doing all these things. And that's the technology piece, right? So we want to do all this fancy stuff and we're leaving our customers lying hurt in the ditches. And I know it's a pretty dark analogy, but it's the reality. And if you really think about it,
it's reality. Yes. Yeah.
It's not customer based because if you're competing internally and all it's going to take, right, in your industry is to be the one that looks up, is to be the one that rises above the nose and starts listening to the signals. We talk about hyper personalization, right? We talk about omnichannel in marketing. And if I had a VP of marketing come to me, Jim, how do I get to omnichannel? He goes, I'm doing all this technology stuff. I'm doing all this stuff. I said, hey, how are your budgets? And he said, they're channel based. I'm like, until you fix that, you'll never get on the channel. And he's like, what? I'm like, you're incentivizing people. Like you go to a marketing meeting, right? Where they talk about the channels get together. You never want to be the second to last person or the last one, right? Because by the time it gets to you, when you're talking about attribution, you've already hit 100%. So now you're telling the business that I'm giving you more than 100% because you've added all up because everyone's taking their piece of attribution, but it's not the same. And it's that same kind of concept. If you want to stay in channels, if your operating model is channel based, if your budget is channel based, all the technology in the world isn't going to fix that. So you have to look at it holistically. You have to look at the analog piece of it, which is your budget, which is your operating model, which is all those pieces of the puzzle that go beyond that before you just start throwing technology at it. Because you're just going to throw money away, right? You're throwing millions of dollars away every year to try to get to a destination that you don't quite understand.
I like how you're saying there is basically you're understanding your current state and not, yes, you might have some forecast, value stream, vision in mind, but understanding what you've got first, getting better at it, maturity, before you start, what I was saying earlier about the phases of business improvement, process improvement, automation, AI is at the end, and the digital, so the digital analog at the start, the budgets, your forecasts, your current channels, your operating model you just said, to going omni-channel with different technologies, etc. That's the future.
Yeah, it's the slowest path. Take a step back. And we're human beings, right? Human beings made computers. Human beings made systems. Human beings made that, and we can't take the human beings out of it, right? And even AI, right? I can sit there and I can do stuff in AI, but if I don't have the viewpoint of that analog side of it, the human side of it, AI can't be empathetic, right? AI is sycophantic by nature, right? As most systems are. They'll tell you what you tell them to tell you, right? So if you can't discern between noise and reality, right? If you can't understand that having 1,000 reports when it could have 2 or 5 or 10, and I can do more with 10 than I can with 1,000, that's the piece of the puzzle. We do things because we can, not because we should. And that's the problem with just jumping to the technology solution, is that, especially if it's IT based, right? It's the whole concept of technology for technology's sake, right? And it's cool to be innovative. It's cool to be bleeding edge in certain areas. But man, if that's your business model, it's going to fall apart. And
So that's a couple of great things you're saying. This I'm gonna the concept of slow is fast is by doing things, let's say thoroughly, but in order, from the foundations, basics first, to get that understanding. And you've talked about your producers, consumers, your business lead. You've got the business's voice considerations in there. The part about systems and technology, it will tell you what you tell it to tell you. So that is the quote of quotes, ladies and gentlemen. It's at the second part where you just said you can do more with 10 reports than 100. So there's in this space, like I tried to simplify, and I think we were talking about, we're getting it down to the fundamentals, the first principles. Excuse me. That there's only the core questions that you want to be asking and then getting the answers for. Not 1,000. You could answer 1,000 questions if it's helpful. I know that you talked about the Parkinson's law, that the time will expand, the task expands the time you allow it. If you ask 1,000 questions, you're going to get 1,000 answers. Because if you ask the 6 specific questions, then you get the specific answers. So
you reach for them. If you don't get those answers, that's when you set your sail towards getting those answers, right? At the end of the day, we have to set our, and again, I'm going to be a little academic here and talk about it being about the journey, right? We all think about a destination, right? We all want to be at this future state, right? And which is ironic because I think ideal state is a better way of thinking it than future state, because future state is just tomorrow, right? Tomorrow's a different state than it is today, right? Whether it's good or bad is irrelevant in that context, right? So if we think ideal state, we have a North Star. We have that lighthouse in the future, in the distance. Now, as a business, we probably will never get to that lighthouse, and that's okay. It's about the journey, right? It's about getting the journey and understanding the journey and learning from the journey, right? Again, I'm going to throw out a literary reference as well, like Candide, Voltaire's Candide, right? He goes through there searching for Cunegonde. Hey, you know what? I got to get her. She's the most beautiful thing. I love her so much. She's a destination. And along the way, like, they go through a hell to try to find her. But they realize when they get there, right, that it's not what they thought it was going to be. And they realize that the journey is the important thing. And what he says at the end of the book is, let us cultivate our garden, right? And that's, to me, one of the most powerful sentences at the end of a book is, let us cultivate our garden. Because that's what we're trying to do here, is cultivate our garden, right? It's our garden. It's our soil. We need to get our hands dirty. We need to get it done. And we need to have a purpose. A garden has a purpose, right? We're not just turning soil. We're making something. We're growing something. We're building something. And so if we realize the journey is where it's about, we give ourselves the ability to fail. We give ourselves some leeway, right? We give ourselves a safety net to say, hey, it's okay if we fail a little bit, because we have things in place. We have this liminal layer that we can go back to and refer to help us get better the next time. So we don't fail the same way twice. And I think that's the difference. We can fail 10 times, but if we fail the same way 10 times, we failed ourselves. And I think that's what this architecture piece of it, this liminal layer, this piece of the puzzle that's missing in a lot of places. And it's not, I don't want to pretend it's more important, right? If I think about a race car going around a track, all 4 wheels are super important. There's not one wheel that's more important than the other 3. But if you take one of them off, and if you try to run with 3 wheels, you're not going to do very well. You're not going to go very fast, and it's not going to be very safe. And so I'm not suggesting that we make one of the wheels more important than the other. I'm just suggesting that we use all 4 wheels on our car. Okay. And architecture is one of those wheels, right? Architecture is definitely one of those. And it's the wheel that sometimes it's the spare tire, which is better than nothing. And sometimes it's just missing. And the beauty of architecture too, and in every organization, it's a necessity, it's a need, but you don't need to hire it all the time. And you and I can talk about this, is that fractional architecture is a thing. It's a real thing. And it's a powerful thing, right? Because most organizations, especially mid-sized ones that are trying to find their rhythm and find their way, like, they're not going to go and hire a bunch of architects, right? A business architecture, but they still need it. So the availability of fractional architecture, the availability, because again, we are the caretakers for that vacation home, and we can scale and we can take care of multiple. I can take care of multiple vacation homes simultaneously because I don't have to live there either. I can go mow the lawn at 5 of them during the course of the week. I run my landscaping business. I'm not just doing my own lawn, right? I'm doing others. And so there's options out there for people to be able to go, and there's frameworks out there like yours and stuff that people can look at it. And again, you need a guided tour. This isn't something that most organizations could just jump into, right? They have to have a tour guide a little bit, or a cartographer, right? Let's map your organization, let's figure out what it looks like. And then you just need a tour guide. right? There's different levels of that. But again, put all four wheels on the car and you'll be much more successful and you'll be much smoother and you'll have a better chance of winning.
Yep. Okay. And then I like how you're saying it's not one wheel is more important than the other. You need all of them. And then they play a different role. And you said all spare tire there. I'm just going to make sure I'm going to capture and play back in case the audience missed it, is the ideal state versus the future state. I think that could have been missed there. That's fantastic. So yeah, you might not achieve the future state, and that's when you start to see it. It's in the journey to get there. And that journey is, give it that liminal layer you said about creating the safe space. And so I think this is the part where organizations probably haven't got that part right, is that they don't create that safe space. And it is about don't fail. And it's like, if you fail, failure is bad. No, like you just said, I'll quote you said, it's okay to fail as long as you don't fail twice on the same thing. And so, yep. And so fantastic with that one. And the fractional architecture is like, you're bang on. That's exactly right. You don't need architects there for all the time. They might start the tour and let's go, this is what you need to do. And then do what was the term you used there? Is the caretaker. The caretaker, you don't own the home, you don't live there, but you come in there for the maintenance to see you're still on track. That is great. Then it comes back to the first thing in the introduction where you said the cartographer. And so that's what you have well described the role of the cartographer. Fantastic. Okay, so now the last part, I think I've got that right. The last part is the third part of the episode is having now done this as an honors in English, if I got that, the honors in English, the practitioner of a decade in leadership roles as business owner, and now into your cartographer, also now published author. If you could do it all again, what would you do differently?
Man, it's interesting because I am a firm believer in the journey. And so I'm always being introspective and saying, hey, what can be better? What can be different? How can I improve? And I think if I was going to put it down in just a few bullet points, I think when I first started off, I tried too hard to get people to believe in business architecture instead of believe in the intent, right? I pushed process, I pushed theory, I pushed framework instead of pushing value, right? So really understanding the value of it. And it took me a little while to realize the value of it. I knew intrinsically, hey, there's important stuff to do here, but being able to communicate the value of it, the value stories, being able to sit there and say, hey, if you want to spend 8 million on a Salesforce implementation, I can save you $1.5 million if you have business architecture up front, because the discovery time to value, time to decision is a lot shorter, and it's going to cost a lot less money, and the ROI is going to be faster. Your time to value is going to be ongoing and better. But being able to articulate that wasn't available. I think the other part of it is looking at it just from the kind of the nostalgic version of, hey, you know what, let's kumbaya, let's get all together and do this. And I think really understanding that it has to be, you have to meet people where they're at, right? You can't drag everybody 3 steps. It's like the maturity thing. If you're a 2, I'm not going to take you to a 5 tomorrow. We're going to do a 2.5, then a 3.5, so on and so forth. And so you have to think about it in steps, and you can't be too far ahead of the thing. And I think the other piece of it is really just being, I call it listening to the business, right? Really taking a step back and taking your own predispositions and your own thoughts and subjectivity out of it and saying, what really does the business need? What does the customer need? And the voices, right? There's 3 voices in a business. The only 3 that should matter is the customer, the company, and compliance. And if you're listening to other voices than that, are you really hearing what's going on? Or are you just getting resistance and just getting noise instead of actually getting a signal? And so that's one of the things that took me a little while to get to. And again, also letting things die naturally, right? I tried to resuscitate, whether it be a framework, whether it be a process, whether it be this or that, too often, I think, in my career. And I'm like, oh, let's do CPR on this ocean cannery matrix, right? Because I'm sure it's going to work for you. Sometimes they don't work. Sometimes they're just not the right tool. And it's okay to let it die. And I don't say abandon it too quickly, but I think sometimes you have to understand when it's time to just put it in the corner and let it die.
Yep. All right. Okay. That's great. So I'm going to play it back to you so no one's missed that one. So the first one is about intent. So you're maybe not say the old school, but the more those that want to apply the framework to the letter, which you're probably going to get a lot of calls about. Is it not about I wrote a book and it's about business architecture, but it's not actually about business architecture. It's about the application to achieve an outcome of business transformation.
Right.
So I don't really talk about business transformation. I talk about, as you're saying, the journey to get you to the outcome they want. So that's a great learning there for not only juniors but seniors in the practice there about the value, to communicate the value. And so the things you're talking about, if you did business architecture early in the piece, your system you want to implement, that you'll get the time to value quicker, your ROI faster. Okay, so the first one is about the value. Second is the classic, which is great, and I'm glad you're saying it, and great to hear it, is the meet people where they are. And it's then understand there's a process, and maybe and what you're saying is that you are taking people through the process, telling them there is a process. So not jumping to the end, but taking it through the process, thinking steps, I think you said. And then the third one is listen to the business and ladies and gentlemen, if you missed it, the 3 C's you said is the customer, the company, and compliance. Those are the main 3 voices. And if you're not, there might be, and to the title of the book, you might be talking or listening too much to the noise, but not the signal. And the last one is that letting things die naturally. And then so if it's like slinging a dead horse and like the thing is dead, it's dead. Trying to revive it, it's like it might be better off just to let it die naturally. All righty. Yeah. Did I get that right?
Yeah. I think so. Yeah. I mean, yeah, of course, I can sit there and we could wax philosophical for hours more, but yes, at the end of the day, right. I mean, we learn from our mistakes, we learn from what we do. And, I guess I can leave it with, when I wrote my book and when you read my book, if you read my book, right, it's not about finding answers there. It's about finding questions. It's about finding questions for yourself about like, how can I do this? How can I apply this? How can I get this going? And does this really make sense to me? And not from a practical sense, but from a more, theoretical sense, like, where am I? I don't want to get into an existential thing, but at the end of the day, like we should be looking for questions in our approach and not answers, because the answers will become self-evident with those questions and with our ability to question ourselves and think about things in ways that we haven't thought about before, right? And kind of remember, most importantly, to maintain our humanity, right? And that we are the bosses of the business, not the other way around, right? And we are not the boss. The tools don't boss us, right? The tools do a lot of our work for us, but they always have to be pointed in the right direction. And it's our job and our duty to make sure that happens.
That's a great one. That's a great quote there to finish off there, Jim, about the tools aren't the boss of us. And I see that as where if it's a particular framework or methodology, or someone has come in and said, we're going to do it a particular way, and they're so now wedded to that approach that it's like, well, appropriately and proportionally, that's the way you're supposed to apply it, right? But they've forgotten that. And they're caught up in probably what you said at the beginning, the noise. They're caught up in the noise as opposed to listening to the signal. All righty. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, Jim, all the way from the USA. We'll wrap it up there. Great job. Now, to people get a hold of you, I'll put your LinkedIn contact details in the show notes, as well as to get the book hot off the press, just released yesterday. So you're getting this as new as new. So when this will come out, hopefully not too long, in a week or two, we'll post it up there. I'll tag you, do what you want, share it to your network. But they'll have the show notes on the actual episode itself, so they can get a hold of you. Either it's going to be on the website, on YouTube, or any one of the podcast channels that it's listed on.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a blast. Let's do it again sometime.
My pleasure, my friend. My pleasure. We will do it again. We'll do it again. We'll have maybe when book number 2 is coming out. You're going to give us an insight, a little bit of a exclusive that there is. It's on the way. It's in draft. We're working on it in the background.
There we go. Yeah, I'll type it while we're talking.
Hey. All righty, Jim. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And we'll be in touch.
Thank you. You too.
Cheers, buddy. Okay. See you. Bye.